الهداة المهديين المظلومين سيما بقية الله في الأراضين روحي وأرواح العالمين لتراب مقدمه الفداء. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله، السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله، وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك. عليكم منا جميعا سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار، ولا جعله الله آخر العهد منا لزيارتكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. قال الله تبارك وتعالى في كتابه بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قال يا ابن إن القوم استضعفوني وكادوا يقتلونني فلا تشمت بي الأعداء ولا تجعلني مع القوم الظالمين. صدق الله العلي العظيم. أفلح من صلى على محمد وآل محمد. After the Prophet was to be given to none other than Ali ibn Abi Talib, salawatullahi alayhi. Not only the political leadership and the outer leadership and authority, but also the Ahlul Bayt, and in particular Imam Ali, was the heir to the prophetic knowledge. He was the one to explain the religion and implement the religion. This right, unfortunately, was usurped from Imam Ali, was usurped from Ahlul Bayt, alayhim alaf at-tahiyyati was-salam. Upon this, many aggressions, many oppressions, many mistreatments were conducted against Imam Ali and his family. Books of history are witness to this. Therefore, one would assume, and one can confidently say, that the relationship between Imam Ali and the Khulafa, there is another one. One that says, no, Imam Ali was a good friend to the Khulafa. He was a help to the Caliphs. Assalamu alaikum. He was an aid to their decision making. He helped them, he counseled them. As you can see, the two understandings have a drastic difference. From one side, so it is upon us to understand what is the true nature of their relationship. How does Imam of our discussion tonight? And we will try to do that in the following way. Firstly, we will discuss the general attitude Imam Ali had towards the Khulafa. We need to uncover that, discover that, so then we can base our further discussions upon that point, upon that understanding. Secondly, the second part of our discussion would involve objections that are at times brought up against the Imamiyya, showcasing the friendship of Imam Ali with the Khulafa. One of those is the naming of his children after the Khulafa. This is perhaps a misconception or a point you have heard in many places. The second point that is usually used is the marriage of his daughter Kulthum to the second Khalifa. So we will inshallah look at these points in the following manner. Before going into the meat of the discussion, sometimes you hear from certain individuals, and you may have sometimes thought of the matter like this: what is the point of digging history up so much? We are uncovering all these nasty details. It's not good for us. Islam is a religion of spirituality. It's about a religion of good manners, good akhlaq. It's about growing, it's about love, it's about peace. Reading about history, going back to these details, all it does is bring animosity. All it does is bring tension. Why would you go back to history? They were all great human beings. They were all great companions. Yes, they had their difference, but leave those differences to be. Let bygones be bygones. Let's live in the now. Who cares about history? To be honest, this kind of thinking is very naive. Understanding history is important to the core of our belief. Our very theology comes from understanding history. You see, today Islam has reached us through two main channels. The channel of Ahlul Bayt, which we are proud followers of, and the channel from a group of the companions. Islam has reached us in these two modes, these two channels, these two ways. The question is, if you want to really grow in your religion, really grow spiritually, become close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, fulfill your duty in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then you need to know what Allah wants from you. You need to know which Islam I need to follow. Is it the Islam of the Ahlul Bayt, or is it the Islam of the companions? Therefore, fulfilling your duty in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, knowing your religion, knowing your path to salvation, requires that you know history. Because history determines which version of Islam you are going to find to be the authentic one. Yes, these discussions, these theological discussions should never be a cause of disunity. It should never cause animosity, bloodshed, dispute among us. It should not be used as a weakness between us and our Sunni brothers and sisters. We should love them and truly love them. This should not be a point where the enemy, whoever they may be, uses it against us to cause separation and disunity. Nonetheless, academic discussion, knowing our religion is important. It's completely independent. We can be mutually respectful. We can have these discussions about the details of history to verify the authentic Islam, yet remain friends, remain in peace and coexist. So never be fooled by this line of argument, why history? Why bother with the details? Why backbite? It's not spiritual. Tell them, come to your senses. What are you talking about? I want to know the Islam I'm following. The Islam I'm following, is it an authentic Islam? The channel, the way that takes it back to Rasulullah, is it a way that he approves of? Does it have legitimacy? Having understood briefly the importance of history and how it determines our duty and our salvation in this dunya and in the akhirah, let's return to our discussion. How was Imam Ali with the Khulafa? You see, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam, in a famous hadith that many of you have heard, in the later days of his life, came to the public and delivered a sermon, and then he said, I leave with you two what? Two weighty things. Inni tarikun fikum al-thaqalain aw thaqalain. If you hold on to these two things, you shall never go astray. What are these two things? The book of Allah and itrati ahl bayti, and my family, my ahl al-bayt. Firstly, we understand from this hadith that we have a duty to go to the Quran and to go to the Ahlul Bayt for guidance, to receive our religion. We also understand something else from this hadith. This hadith teaches us that the Ahlul Bayt, just like the Quran is hudan, man and every woman. In the same way, the Ahlul Bayt are a source of guidance. They are a source of preservation of the religion. The A'imma, our Imams, had a duty. We have a duty towards them. They also had a heavy responsibility on their shoulders. This responsibility was to preserve the religion, to explain the religion, to make sure the people are following the correct religion, the one that Allah wants, the one that the Prophet preached. And they will do that to the best of their ability. Every Imam was dealing with a different set of circumstances. They were placed under the rulership of different rulers. The Islamic Ummah at their times would have been different to the time of the previous Imam and the Imam after. Their circumstances was unique. Each Imam had unique circumstances. And in response to these circumstances, the Imams would respond differently. And that's why you see the A'imma taking different stances against different circumstances. Depending on the socio-political climate, how the situation is evolving, the A'imma would make decisions appropriate in light and in hope of preserving the religion. That's their main goal. Imam Ali alayhi salam was the first of our A'imma, the best of our A'imma. And he had this important responsibility on his shoulders as well. He had to preserve the religion and continue the teaching and the expansion and the growth of the religion and the Muslim Ummah in all of its parts. Allah had a plan. He said, I will deliver political power, influence from the Prophet to Imam Ali, so he has total power and he can control this preservation in the best of ways. But history happened and it took a different path. The will of Allah, the will of the Prophet was not executed. However, even if Imam Ali was usurped from the best way to preserve the religion, which would be to assume power, to have all the resources at his disposal, nonetheless, the duty, the responsibility does not fall from his shoulders. It is not like they took away this rulership from him. Imam Ali is going to be in the sidelines and say, I'm not going to do anything about the religion anymore. Imam Ali still had a responsibility to preserve the religion within his capacity, within his power. He still is responsible to make the best of decisions to ensure that Islam and the Muslim Ummah, in particular in the sensitive and vulnerable state they were after the death and the demise of the Prophet, to safely move to a secure establishment. It's a new religion at the end of the day. The Prophet only ruled about 10 years in Medina. A lot of the people, a lot of these new Muslims are still thinking in the old ways. There is a lot of tribal tension. Imam Ali has to preserve both the true authentic Islam, the teachings, and the Muslims. Okay, they took power from him, no problem. I will still continue to execute whatever power I have to preserve the religion. This is Imam Ali's mission. And think to yourself for a moment. Think about all the mistreatment. Think about all the oppression. Think about all the wrongdoing against Imam Ali, his wife and his family. I won't be naming the events, but you know all of them. Despite all of this, Imam Ali still is watchful and conscious of his duty and responsibility towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, towards the religion. He's not going to let the religion go. With whatever is in his hands, whatever he's capable, he's going to protect the religion. Therefore, if you see that Imam Ali is participating in the decision making, you see that Imam Ali is giving counsel. Sometimes the Khulafa, although the number of times they approach Imam Ali for advice is not many. Is not many, unfortunately. But the times they do approach him for advice and counsel, he provides his counsel. And that famous statement of, was it not for Ali, Umar would have perished? This statement has become famous because he repeated this up to 70 times every time he would ask Imam Ali for counsel. Imam Ali would be present and respond whenever they asked for help. He would not sit on the sidelines. There were critical decisions and historical battles that was not for the intervention of Imam Ali, the fate of Islam and Muslimin may have went to a different direction. So Imam Ali was present. But his presence, his cooperation, his help is not because he loves the leaders. It's not because he's best of friends with them. It's not because we were good buddies during the time of Rasulullah. Rather, it's because of Islam. It's because of his duty. That despite all the pressure, all the tension, all the mistreatment, this man, this gem of a man, this miracle of a human being, still stands and wants to preserve the religion. This is the attitude, this is the mindset that we need to analyze the history of Imam Ali during the leadership of the Khulafa. A man who wants to fulfill his responsibility to preserve the religion at whatever cost. They have taken away his right, no problem. I still have a duty. I still love this religion. I still love Islam. I still love Allah. I still want to perform. I still want to fulfill my obligation. Is he always pleased with the leaders? No. Where did you get that from? Rather the opposite. Imam Ali is critical of some of the decisions and the general direction the Khulafa were taking in their leadership. Where am I getting this from? I am getting this from history. History, both Sunni and Shi'i history, is a testament to Imam Ali's critical opinion of the Khulafa and the leadership. You see, we know how the first Khalifa was selected through the Council of Saqifa. We know how the second ruler was selected through the will of the first one. The third was also selected by a council, but by a council chosen by the second ruler. 6 people were in this council. Imam Ali was also in the council. The fate of this council, they are deciding, majority wins. Who is to be the third leader? Imam Ali is also a candidate. There is an individual, Abdul Rahman ibn Auf, if I'm not mistaken. The vote comes to him. He determines, his vote determines the future of the Muslim Ummah. Let's see what criteria this individual has. He turns to Imam Ali and says, Ya Ali, will you act upon the book of Allah? Imam Ali says, yes, I'll rule according to the book of Allah. Will you act and rule according to the sunnah of the Prophet? Yes, of course I will act and rule according to the sunnah of the Prophet. Will you also rule and act according to the sunnah and the practice of the Shaykhain, the 2 previous rulers? Imam Ali says, wait a minute. Where did this come from? I will not rule according to their practice. I will not take their precedent to be legitimate for me. Then this individual, Abdul Rahman, turns to who was to become the third Khalifa, Uthman, and tells him and asks him the same questions. And when he comes to the third question, will you act according to the sunnah of the Shaykhain? Will you act according to the precedent and the practice of the previous 2 leaders? He says, yes, I will. No problem. You see, Imam Ali could have played politics. He could have said yes. Yeah? He could have answered yes to Abdul Rahman. But he didn't. He could have said yes then, and after he assumes the position of power and leadership, he will act according to how he wants. But Imam Ali is a man of principle. He does not play these games. And he wants history to know. See, you and I can know his attitude and his opinion of the Khulafa because he took this stance. He was willing to put aside power, influence, wealth, all of that to the side because he wants to stick by his principles. There is no legitimacy for the practice and the precedent of the previous leaders. You want more clarity? There was a group during the time and the rulership of Imam Ali alayhi salam who thought they were more religious than Imam Ali. Have you met people like that? They think they're more religious than the Maraja. There is an expression in the Christian religion, he is more Catholic than the Pope. There was a group of individuals during the time, and their number was not small. History says there was 12,000 of them. These individuals thought they knew the religion better than Imam Ali, that somehow they were more religious than Imam Ali, someone who was raised by the Prophet from his early days. They thought they're more religious than him. They're known as the Khawarij. Why are they known as the Khawarij? Because they exited. They left the Muslim Ummah. They left the leadership of Imam Ali. And they also left their physical places of stay. And they resided outside of Kufa. 12,000 people. That's a big number. Then Imam Ali, upon this fitna, upon this calamity, upon this disruption in his state, wishes to renew his allegiance with his remaining followers. So, all of them come and present their allegiance, their fealty and loyalty to Imam Ali, that we're still behind you, we still support you. There is one individual, he comes to Imam Ali and repeats the same question that Abdul Rahman repeated in that council. He says, I will now give you my allegiance if you rule according to the Book of Allah, the Sunnah of the Prophet, and the Sunnah of the previous two leaders, the practice and the way of the previous two leaders. Imam Ali looks at him with anger, with disgust. He says, if the two previous leaders, if they took decisions and those decisions was against the Kitab and the Sunnah, was against the Quran and the Hadith and the way of Rasulullah, it has no value. It has no value. What do you understand from this? Do you understand that Imam Ali was a fan and a supporter of everything the Khulafa did? We have this is from Sunni sources. What I read from you are from Sunni sources or common sources that we all accept. Look at this riwayah that is sahih in our own sources. Look at what Imam Ali alayhi salam says. فقال عليه السلام قد عملت الولاة قبلي أعمالا خالفوا فيها رسول الله. That those who assumed power and leadership, they committed actions where they disobeyed Rasulullah. You're saying he's good friends with them. متعمدين لخلافه. Allahu Akbar. They were intentionally doing things to disobey Rasulullah, to oppose Rasulullah. This is an authentic hadith in our sources. It's a very strong wording. Very, very strong wording. He's saying these individuals, they tried to deviate intentfully and purposefully from the way of Rasulullah. This is the general mindset we need to have when dealing with history. When dealing with the history of early Islam, with how Imam Ali presented himself and how he acted in the face of the Khulafa. Having understood this, very important muqaddimah, very important introduction, having known the general attitude of Imam Ali being one of critique, of not being pleased with the decisions of Rasulullah, in other circumstances in our books, in the same sermon, he says in 20 counts, the Khulafa created bid'ah, they created innovations in religion. One of them was Taraweeh, which Imam tried to fix, but even that he wasn't always very successful. 20 counts. Okay, so we understand the general attitude of the Imam. We see that he's critical. But what do we do with these two questions I posed in the beginning of the lecture? Often we hear that, okay, you follower of Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq, you're telling me all this concoction of yours, things you've made up in your head, if your belief is firm, if your understanding of history is correct, then tell me, why is Imam Ali, despite his critique, despite his distaste, why is he naming his children after these individuals? You see, they're not making this up. This is not a fabrication. Sheikh al-Mufid rahmatullah alayh in his book Al-Irshad mentions that Imam Ali had 27 children. MashaAllah, 27 children, boy and girl. Some of them he begins to name these children. He starts with Sayyidah Fatima salamullahi alayha, mentions Al-Hasan wal-Husayn, Zainab al-Kubra was Zainab al-Sughra, which is Kulthum. And then he mentions that he had a wife by the name of Habiba. Habiba gave birth to twins. Imam Ali had a set of twins. And he decided to name them Umar and Ruqayya. This is in our own very sources. He then had another wife that many of you know. And this wife is very much known because of her sacrifices through her sons, al-Banin. The mother of the sons. She had many sons. Of those sons, the names are Ja'far, Abdullah. And there is a son by the name of Uthman. So there's a Uthman there as well. They're right. By the way, all of these 4 sons were martyred in Karbala. Then he had another wife by the name of Layla. From this blessed lady, he had a son. He had other children as well, but he had a son which he named Abu Bakr. This is what Sheikh al-Mufid is saying. Sheikh al-Mufid is a giant of Islamic history. So they seem to be correct. If you really hate someone and there is all this tension, why would you want to be reminded of them by naming your children these names? Every time he calls Uthman, he's reminded of the calamities of this individual. Every time he's calling out the name of the second Khalifa, he's reminded of the calamities that fell upon him and his wife. And the first as well. That seems to be a fair point. But if we're critical, if we have that general attitude of Imam Ali that we firstly understood, the answer is not too difficult. Firstly, in response, we just said Imam had 27 kids. If these names were very important for him, if he had like 3 kids and he named all of them these names, then you had a point. But he had 27 kids, mashallah. So he's looking for names. He's trying to find some names. It's not that these names have some relevance, some particular importance for him. Firstly. Secondly, let's go one by one. The first name, Abu Bakr. Who, mashallah, most of you are Arabs here. Who in their right mind, when a baby is born, calls them Abu something? I've never seen it. Nowadays it happens. Nowadays it happens because of the name Abu Bakr. But a newborn baby is never called Abu Hussein, right? I've never heard this. They don't just decide to call him Abu Hussein or Abu Muhammad. I've never seen that. So is this a name that Imam Ali gave it to him? No. Because no one calls their name by a kunya. A kunya is given to someone. And that kunya is not, usually it's not that the father has to give it. Sometimes the community gives it to him. Because there is a sifa, there is a characteristic that is dominant in him, so they will call him by that name. Or it's ma'roof. From what I understand, anyone that is called Ali, they call him what? Abu Hussein. So, and if anyone is called Muhammad, they call him Abu Jasim. Is that? So the community gives these names. It has nothing to do with Imam Ali. That's the second point. The third point is, if he really wanted to name him after the first Khalifa, that he would have chose his actual name, not the kunya of the first Khalifa. He would have called him, as a different historical sources mention, his name was either Atiq, Abdullah, or Abdul Kaaba. Let's come to the second one, the second Khalifa. Firstly, Imam Ali once again did not name him. Yes, his name was Umar, but surprisingly Imam Ali did not name him. In Ansab al-Ashraf, a famous book of history from our brothers, it says, وَكَانَ عُمَرُ بْنُ خَطَّابٍ سَمَّى عُمَرْ ibn Ali بِإِسْمِهِ. Umar himself named him that. Wait a minute. What does he have to do with the naming? It's his son. Let people at least choose the name of their own children. Apparently, this was a thing the second Khalifa used to do. In another book, Siyar A'lam al-Nubala of al-Dhahabi, also mentions that فَعُمَرُ سَمَّاهُ بِإِسْمِهِ. And Umar has done this, the second Khalifa, has done this for many different individuals. What was his intention? Allahu A'lam. Allahu A'lam. I'll leave that to you. But why are you forcing people to name their children after you? If they like you, let them do it themselves. Why are you enforcing this? The third point, even if Imam Ali chose this, there's 21 companions with the name Umar. 21 companions. Why is it about him? Where does Imam Ali mention that I named him because of the second Khalifa? Let's come to the third name, which is, I think, the most interesting one. The third name being the name of the third Khalifa. In Maqatil al-Talibin, this is a book of a Shia history. He says that I named him إنما سميته باسم أخي عثمان ibn Mad'un. The Imam is saying I named him after my brother and friend Uthman ibn Mad'un. Naam. So it's not the third Khalifa. You see, if we don't pay attention to history, these kinds of questions will shake us. And then we'll deviate and take our religion from elsewhere. Once again, Ibn Hajar, a Sunni scholar, counts 26 companions with the name Uthman. Let me make this even more clear for you. We have companions of Imam al-Sadiq, we have companions of Imam al-Baqir, some of them by the name Yazid. There is no dispute that the Ahlul Bayt do not like Yazid. So why did this companion name himself after the enemy of Rasulullah? These were common names. These were names that were popular. It wasn't because of a particular individual. There may be someone right now that has your name and you don't like him. Is that something that is going to say, no, because you have the same name, you are the best of friends? And the more important objection and misconception is the marriage of his daughter to Kulthum. Now, this is a big one. Okay, we'll let the naming go. But what about marrying your own daughter, your beloved, to someone that you supposedly are claiming that there is tension in between? How can we resolve this? Did this happen? What does it show? You see, our scholars have a difference of opinion whether this marriage even took place. Some scholars have written entire books about the occurrence of this marriage, saying no such marriage ever took place. Some of our other scholars say, if this marriage took place, this was a different Kulthum. This was the daughter of Abu Bakr, who after the death of Abu Bakr had come to the house of Imam Ali and was raised there. Let's assume that it wasn't the daughter of Abu Bakr. It was really the daughter of Imam Ali. Firstly, a marriage in the older times, in the olden days, did not mean necessarily that there was a lot of friendship. Sometimes it meant the opposite. Wait a minute. People got married together and they didn't like each other? Yes. There was war between them. There was conflict in between them. They want to resolve the conflict. How would they do that? They would marry. So there was previous tension. They would resolve the tension by marrying into each other's tribes. So a marriage in the olden days, did not necessarily indicate a relationship of love and friendship. Rather, it could have indicated a previous state of tension. That's the first point. The second point, we have indications in both our books and their books that this was a forced marriage. This was a forced marriage. Let me read you the reference. In this reference, I'm not going to read the Arabic. In this reference, which is in our books, the second Khalifa goes to Imam Ali and tells him, I want your daughter. I want your daughter. The Imam tells him, she's a child. Innaha sabiyyatun. Let it go. You're an old man. Innaha sabiyyatun. She's a young girl. Umar, the second Khalifa, is not happy. He goes to the uncle of Rasulullah and Imam Ali, Abbas, and says, I went to Ali and I asked him for his daughter and he rejected. Is there a problem with me? Abiya ba'sun? Is there a problem why he's not giving it to me? And then Abbas says, well, he's a man of his own choice, let him be. He doesn't have to give it to you. And look what Umar says, the second Khalifa, he says, if he does not give back, if he does not accept this marriage, لَأُعَوِّرَنَّ زَمْزَمَ, that I will block Zamzam and I will not leave for them, the Ahlul Bayt, any object of respect except that I will destroy it. Even worse, I will call on to 2 witnesses to give testimony that Ali stole so I could cut his hand. Allahu Akbar. So if this marriage took place, it was a forced marriage. Otherwise, we have a problem at the very source of this issue in questioning whether this marriage took place or not. So we answered the 2 objections of the marriage of Kulthum and also the naming of his children after the Khulafa. And we'll also try to give a brief understanding of the attitude and the mindset that Imam Ali had towards the Khulafa. I'll end with this one point. You see, Imam Ali was a man of many virtues. A man of braveness, courage, chivalry, handsome, knowledgeable, intelligent, eloquent. Someone like that, also pious, spiritual, loved by Rasulullah, is going to cause some jealousy. Human beings. If there is one practical takeaway we can take from this lecture, is no matter who you are, you may have fought many years with Rasulullah, in many wars, sacrificed much wealth and much life and much effort, nonetheless, you are not safe from jealousy. So if there is something we can take away practically from this lecture, is that in these days of Muharram, we can work and think, where are those little hidden points where, for no good reason, I am showing jealousy towards someone who is possessing an attribute that I should be asking Allah for that, instead of wishing that to be not present for that individual. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين.